Today I am going to separate my tomatoes. They have done so well. So it's time now to give them their own pots, and if you would like to sow another round of tomatoes so you have a fresh crop coming through just as these plants start to tire in late summer, then you could sow those today. Right, let's get started. The first thing you do is just tip them out of the pot. Look at those roots. Put the label to one side and then just, oh my goodness, they smell so good. The scent is just coming off of them. Just slowly and gently tease them apart. You want to keep as much compost as you possibly can around each of the roots. There we go. One more. Fantastic. So there you go. So here I've got an empty pot, and just pick them up gently by the base. Don't pick them up by the stems or the leaves because these plants are quite heavy now. They've got a lot of roots. Just push it so you can see it, and you can see I've done one already. And I've got some compost. I'm just going to hold it gingerly in my hand, suspended slightly above the bottom, and then just fill in with compost all around. Turn the pot. There we go. Fill it in all around. Oh. There we go. That is perfect. You might notice that I am planting them a tiny bit deeper than they were in their original pots for germination, and that is because tomatoes will actually grow new roots from the stems. This is not their final position. They are going to be potted on into their final pots or into garden beds and borders, wherever you're going to be growing your tomatoes. This is just a small pot so that you can easily keep them frost free until about the middle of May, which is the last frost date for me. Just check with your local weather conditions to see when your last frost date is. All we've got left to do is make sure that each pot has its own label. Obviously, if you're not growing lots of varieties, you might not mind. So I'll leave that completely up to you. And then just water them in. I put a little bit of seaweed solution. The compost will have more nutrients in it, but until that has a chance to release and the plants will take it up, I'm just going to give them one little seaweed tonic. Then after that, they shouldn't need feeding again before we pot them on, because it should be less than 6 weeks, which is when the compost will run out. So next I'm going to sow myself just a couple more plants for the end of summer. So if my plants are starting to get tired or I've eaten all the tomatoes, I'll have some fresh tomatoes coming through. I think 2 plants, as it's a second sowing, will be plenty. So I've planted them either side of the pot. Then hopefully they won't need potting on until they can go out in their final positions, because it'll be so much warmer by then they can go straight in their pots. You will also notice that I have watered the compost ahead of time. You've got to be really careful because the seeds are so tiny. What can happen is if you water them after you've sown them, you could accidentally push them too deep into the compost, and the compost will effectively smother them and then they won't germinate. It's exactly the same as we use our homemade compost, don't we, at the bottom, and then we put a thick layer of shop ball on top to smother the seeds. So don't do that. If it does happen to you and you think, oh blimey, not germinating, must be what I've done, just tip the whole pot out into a big tray. Then the compost will disperse, be a thinner layer, and the seeds will be able to see the light, and then they will germinate. I'm going to germinate these back up at the house the same as I did with the others. The heat mat is on in the greenhouse, but it's set to a low setting. I'm only doing that just to stop the plants from freezing, because we still have a risk of frost for a few more weeks now. It's about middle of May for me. So it's a much lower temperature just for keeping the tomatoes happy, because they will not survive being frozen. But a warmer temperature is required for germination. So that's the reason I'm going to germinate them in the house where it's nice and toasty, and these plants can grow on in the cooler greenhouse. Now, if you don't have a lot of room, you can grow really beautiful tomatoes in patio pots, and they're so pretty. They actually rival flower pots, don't they? Edible and beautiful.